Welcome to the Kriya Yoga Podcast, a source of inspiration and actionable education for those inspired towards the goal of enlightenment through yogic meditation. Through these interviews, discussions, and reflections, it is my intention to share the possibility of waking up to the reality of self and God realization, and to remind you of the immortal words of Paramahansa Yogananda. Don't look back. Don't look to the left or to the right. Look straight ahead to the goal and go all the way in this lifetime. I'm Ryan Kurczak, and I'll be your host on this adventure of spiritual self-discovery. All right, I'm ready. Are you ready?
I think I'm ready, Ryan.
Okay, so I believe we're recording.
Yep.
Okay. You haven't been on the podcast before, have you?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't really know what's going to happen. That's
okay.
You think you're ready. I don't know. I'm as ready as you are when you turn up for my podcasting.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Kriya Yoga Podcast. I'm here with Vedic astrologer Fiona Marks, who's also the current director of the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship Program. It's wonderful to see you, Fiona.
Thanks, Ryan. It's great to see you too.
Yeah, so I wanted to have Fiona on the podcast because she went through the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship Program, which is the course that I put together. It was a 4-year course at the time. And she now serves in a role of mentor and tutor and guide to the students of that program. And we're going to talk about how astrology can positively impact your spiritual path. But before we get there, Fiona, I know that you came to astrology not because of some amazing sense that it had the truth. How did you come to astrology?
Yeah, that's one of the great mysteries of how I came to astrology, Ryan. You're right. It was not that I necessarily thought that Vedic astrology had the ultimate truth, but I was attracted to the idea of understanding Vedic philosophy in a practical way. Mm-hmm. And I have always been interested in meditation, and that has always naturally led me towards Indian culture and towards Vedic philosophy. So it seemed natural that if I was going to do astrology, I would do Vedic astrology. And that is how I turned up, a complete newbie with no knowledge of astrology, but with a great respect for the process of meditation and, I guess, Indian culture or Vedic culture. So, but I didn't know what the star signs were. I had no idea what planet stood for. I didn't read my star signs. I hadn't ever had a Vedic astrology reading. So I was a bit of a blank slate.
Were you skeptical, though? Because I thought I remember you saying that you were also kind of skeptical about it.
I guess I continue to be skeptical about it in that to me, it's not really something that one needs to fully believe in or like sign over one's critical mind. Mm-hmm. So I remain delighted every time I research a chart, and when I speak to someone, they're like, wow, that's really encapsulated something that I've experienced, or now I'm connecting with a truth inside myself that I hadn't been able to articulate before. Or occasionally one, as the astrologer, actually does predict an event that happened in the past or the future. And if that ever happens, I'm obviously, it's like the very first time. It's a sparkling experience. But I didn't come to astrology as a believer, and even now I encourage my clients to take what is useful from astrology and to not believe that an astrologer has any superpowers or that I'm somehow connected to the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. But to take what is useful from Vedic astrology, what helps you in that conversation that we have, that's really beautiful, unique, and powerful. But I still critically examine everything that I'm thinking about or talking to clients, and I would expect them to question me and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think that's also what made Vedic astrology really enjoyable for me, is that I was also skeptical of it when I first started studying it, but I always found it so much fun. It was so fascinating. Every single time I would do a session with someone, and I'm still thinking, how is it possible this can work? And every single time, like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. So there is this kind of ever new joy when you have skepticism about something that works like astrology. And so,
absolutely.
one other question I'm curious about, because I just thought of it myself. When you were initially starting the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship Program, did you ever think to yourself, I will now be the one mostly in charge of the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship Program?
No. I definitely did not think that at all.
Yeah.
No. So I'm surprised about that too. But I can tell you, you asked me originally, how did I come to astrology? I definitely feel that astrology came and asked me to be here. You know, I felt pulled to do it without really understanding why. And it was exactly the same with this process of curating, directing, whatever it is that I do, guiding around the apprenticeship program, that Ryan, as I finished my live 4 years that I had done with you, basically in real time, you just began to post it onto Teachable. So, and I remember exactly where I was when I received the email that you said, "Hi, students, I have just loaded up all this stuff onto Teachable. What do you think?" And I read that email and I knew instantly that this is what I need to do. So it was a very powerful left field piece of information. So no, when I was listening to the first Rashis and signs, all about the numerology of Vedic astrology, no, I had no idea that one day I would be coordinating it. And I'm just overjoyed that has ended up happening.
Well, it's obviously wonderful to have you. I mean, for me, I know many people on the podcast already know this. There came a time when it became clear to me that I needed to spend more time teaching Kriya Yoga than astrology. However, having developed the program and just seeing how well it worked for students, I didn't want it to just fall away. And so it was very meaningful to me that you were able to sort of step in and keep it going. So that's why we're having this conversation today.
I know, exactly. And I should say for listeners or viewers that my background was in human resource development. Like, I worked in a large organization, I recruited staff, I trained them up, I worked with senior leadership to enhance performance management. So I already came from an assessment and management of curriculum kind of space. And then I was a life coach for another kind of part of my lifetime. So I guess it was natural that I was pulled to do this. But you were asking me about, am I still skeptical about Vedic astrology? And I'm very coy and say, I don't believe in it. I don't expect my clients to believe in it. But now I'm going to sound evangelical. I believe in the apprenticeship program because I knew nothing about astrology. And I now work full-time as an astrologer. So I know that if people are interested in understanding Vedic astrology, I can tell, hand on my heart, if you go through this program, you can learn to be a working astrologer. I'm absolutely sure of.
Yeah.
So might be skeptical about Vedic astrology, but I'm not skeptical about the apprenticeship program.
Well, part of my goal as a teacher, and I was talking to students about this at the Kriya retreat that we did just last weekend, and I've always felt that many of the students who've gone through the apprenticeship program and completed it, they're going to keep going, and they're obviously going to become much better than I ever was. And I still feel that that's going to be the case going through the program. So we also put it together in such a way that it's very formulaic in the sense of building from the foundation up. So, and this was where you benefited because you didn't have any experience in Vedic astrology, which means you just came right in and you started right at the ground level that I was setting it at. And whereas some people, of course, they've dabbled in astrology and they try to start the program and they say, well, can I just jump ahead? And my answer, and your answer now is always, well, no, you can't, because you have to follow those procedures. So you really benefited from that. And I think it shows because it's like the idea of if your teacup's already full, you can't go dumping more stuff into it. Anyway, what I wanted to get into specifically with you, though, since we are talking on the Kriya Yoga podcast, and I really feel that Vedic astrology has two profound benefits spiritually. Number one is that it's really good at providing a sense of personal self-knowledge about our own individual soul path, but also the study of astrology, even if you're not getting into the specifics about the individual, like there's a philosophy there that's really profound and powerful. So to start with the first one, what has your experience been, and how do you see astrology benefiting people to understand themselves so that they're able to navigate their spiritual life with more poise, I suppose.
Yeah. One of the things that I was really touched to find out about Vedic astrology when I started being an astrologer, when I started doing my donation readings in the practicum, and then when I became fully an astrologer, is how validating Vedic astrology is. Because personally, there's nothing worse than going to see a advisor / counselor / psychologist who has the wrong impression of you and boxes you into something that you are not. And that would be my fear of seeing an astrologer personally, actually, would be that they would not know who I truly was. But my experience every time I speak to people about Vedic astrology using this methodology is that they find it validating. It's like, and it instantly gets, as an astrologer, it instantly gets you to talk with the person about what's the most important thing that they want to talk about. So I think Vedic astrology helps you connect with your authentic self. And that's where your spirituality truly is. You know, it's not in all of the trappings that you might have in terms of status, or it's not even in the problems that you might have in a particular range of a setup. It's your authentic self. And Vedic astrology just has a way of getting right down to that. And yeah, I love working on things that help people know who they truly are.
Yeah. And when you're doing an astrology session, we might get a little technical or a little jargony here. But a lot of people look at their sun sign or their moon sign. Do you find that to be as accurate as it needs to be? If so, how? And if not, what are some other ways that you look at the chart to get a deeper sense of, who the person is and what they're working with?
Yeah. Okay. So then this reflects the way that I was taught, because I came into astrology with nothing. I actually don't preconceive that the sun will be the most important planet in a person's chart, or that the moon will be the most important, or that their ascendant lord would be the most important. I'm actually looking at each chart fresh, and the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship Program teaches you a process of analyzing a chart in a step-by-step way. Generally, we go house by house by house with no preconceived idea. So as I analyze the chart, I will get to look at the sun, I will get to look at the moon, and I'm going to look equally at all of the other planets as well. And through that process, themes are going to emerge from the chart. The astrologer is going to see things come up several times from different causes, different places in the chart, different planets, different relationships. And that is what becomes the most important thing to talk to the client about, not a preconceived notion that this is a sun sign Taurus or this person is a sun sign Capricorn, and therefore these are the issues they're going to have. So I don't know whether that quite answers the question that you are asking, but each chart is as unique as each human being is. Mm-hmm. And for some charts, the sun is going to be the most important. And for some charts, the ascendant's going to be the most important. For another chart, it'll come from somewhere else, or some relationship between the planets, not even a particular planet itself. So it is a very individualized experience to have a reading with a Vedic astrologer, because they're not boxing you into one tiny element of your life chart.
Yeah. I think it's important to have sessions with astrologers also because, when you get online or you're reading about a sun sign or you're reading about a moon sign, you get a general idea, but an astrologer, a well-trained astrologer, is able to look at different aspects of the chart and dig deep into it to figure out, well, how does that really apply to the individual? And it reminds me of a quote. I was just looking it up here from Swami Shri Yukteswar. It's an interesting quote. He says, "If ignoramuses misread the heavens and see there a scrawl instead of a script, that is to be expected in this imperfect world."
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot we could do with that quote, right?
Yeah.
Because even you and I don't know whether you feel like, but let's say that we do have some significant training in Vedic astrology. one as an astrologer and as a person can feel very humbled by actually how the universe works. So
Yeah.
yeah, that quote speaks volumes. Yes.
Yeah. So another question is how useful is it to treat astrology from a fatalistic point of view? I mean, I know it's not useful at all, but I just want to hear. I already have the answer to that one. I just want to know what your experience has been in that kind of realm.
Yeah, I think astrology is really good at putting in front of you this concept of whether we have free will or not. So other sorts of counselings and therapies don't necessarily put that as one of the major questions you want to answer before you can undertake the therapy. And astrology certainly does that. And I think that my experience, I'm speaking personally now, that it seems to me that free will and things being fated is a kind of continuum. You know, if we put at the extreme, we make a unique choice in every single moment, so it's complete free will. And we put at the other extreme that everything is preordained and it's an illusion that we think we have any control over it. So if you had those two as the ends of the continuum, I think it's really good to be open to experiencing life all the way along that continuum. So I agree. You just laughed when you asked me the question, how useful is it to think that things are fatalistic? And I agree that we do sometimes want to laugh at that because, of course, you have agency. And more than ever, as we are regaining our awareness, we have more agency. And then as soon as you have that, you can make fresh choices and you can go off script. So that's the free will side of it. But just because I'm in a little bit of a rebellious mood, I'm going to talk about also the fate side of it, that I think for Westerners, there can be something very educative and humbling to know, to at least entertain the idea that some things are fated, and to maybe take off our Westerner filter that is about I can change my life. I can make myself rich. I can make myself healthy. I can make myself happily married. Those are really empowering. So I think it's great that we have experimented with those filters. I think as Westerners, sometimes it can be really healthy to be open to being a part of this whole experience of the universe, and that the universe is having experience through my dancing combination of consciousness and matter. And I might not be as powerful as I thought I was. So there you go. That's two answers to that question.
Well, that leads into, another part of the conversation I wanted to have. But just out of curiosity, how would you share that with someone, in the sense of, I can remember working with clients, and there is an idea in astrology that if you just get the right gemstone, if you just get the right yagya, if you just chant the right mantra, you will be able to be, meet your soulmate and be a millionaire and be spiritually enlightened and these kinds of things. And there's a part of astrology that kind of speaks to that. But then there's another side of it where you see sort of this interplay of life, and there are some things that are in the chart or in a person's life that it's like they're there for a reason. And so how do you share that with someone, and how do you speak to that?
Well, it depends on the chart, doesn't it? Because it depends on what the person's receptivity is to that, and what obstacles they might have, and whether they're going to find that an empowering thought or a depressing and disempowering and kind of give up fatalistic. So it's a little bit case by case, but there can be a sense of wonder that there's something bigger than we are, and that maybe this is all a play. It's in a very beautiful way, not in a kind of flippant way, but we're part of here playing, and but it would depend how the person is going to respond. Some people, so we we could go into each planet and talk about it. But perhaps if someone's going through a very Saturn period and a very Saturn suffering, and you say to them, oh, it's all a play in a game, that
Right.
they might crush you if you're in physical proximity to them. It's not going to be the right time.
Right.
But if it was a Saturn person, sometimes saying that hard things happen is going to really resonate with that person, and that you're not trying to magic wand away a real experience that this person has gone through the hard knocks of having. So, yeah, I think it's easy to talk about continuums, like we just talked about free will versus fate. But it's much more whole and dynamic than that, isn't it? Because what people are able to respond to at different times in their life is different. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a good jumping off point there. You mentioned when someone's going through a Saturn time period, that you don't want to say it's just part of the grand design. Usually that's when you want to say something like, you just got to hang on, and they'll appreciate that. But then, if you have someone who on the other side is having a more Jupiterian influence, and they're going through a difficult time, well, then it would make more sense to say, well, yes, can you see how this is part of something bigger, how this is leading to higher knowledge and so on, because that's very Jupiterian. So, part of the issue here with astrology, with the astrologer, is the astrologer can see where a person is, ideally.
Yeah.
And, if you just go to a counselor, or you just go to your guru, well, hopefully your guru has some insight, but the astrologer has a little more insight, because the astrologer is going to know what planetary quality is really taking ascendancy in your life. And like, for example, the moon, sometimes when people are being more influenced by the moon, the best thing you can tell them is to just be more receptive. And instead of a Martian time period where you have to take action and drive and get things done, use your free will, use your power. Well, sometimes with the moon, it's more about, just keep riding the waves and being receptive to what comes. So I think it's very important to recognize that the astrologer sees where someone is.
Exactly. And at such a nuanced level, because you just mentioned the moon and being receptive, which is great advice and really appropriate. And the moon can also cause starvation in a chart, which might encourage someone to over-personalize their experience. They might be getting really attached to, why is this happening to me? And it's really unfair. And that's almost the moon doing that. It's they're personalizing these things. So that might be a case where one would give, that other advice that, hey, you're part of a big, big picture, and you are one person, and all those other one people that are going around, they're not inflicting this on you personally. They're busy with their own stuff. They're not thinking about how to make your life hard and terrible. So astrology, when you look at all the data, allows you to see where even a planet that's performing really well for a person might have that Achilles heel. It might just have one area where it's not working well. Or a planet that's not working well for the person has one real strength that the person can rely on and grab a hold of as their landing zone to begin to get to know that planetary energy better. So it's very subtle and it's very nuanced.
Yeah. And the idea of timing, I think, is important to kind of pull into maybe the question about fatalism and surrender. Yeah. Because, you've got your chart, which is the base idea of your energies, of the momentum of your karma in a way. And there are different times when some of those energies are more active than others. And so, you can ride your fate in a way, right?
Yeah. I think that is, as well as all the detail we talked about, the timing and the grace that is either coming from timing, which is wonderful when that happens, and there's other moments of grace in the chart as well. And I think that is important in terms of your question, that if I just do this many mantras, or if I wear this gemstone, you know what, if you do that at the right time, in a graceful house, just when that's right, it's going to work beautifully for you. Yeah. And if you believe deeply in Vedic astrology and your Vedic astrologer tells you that this is going to help, there's a grace in that
Mm-hmm.
that can take you over a difficult period. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, those trinal energies that are there in the chart are really important too.
Yeah, and oftentimes, it's good to work with an astrologer that you develop rapport with, because when you develop rapport with an astrologer and they say something to you, I think many of us, particularly in the Western world, we have all kinds of blind spots, and we think we know ourselves so well. But an astrologer can look at particular Lajatati Avashtas. If we think of like Mercury and Saturn together, and that's it's a wonderful combination for research and really digging to the heart of things. But it's also a wonderful combination to where a person is never satisfied with the information they get. So for example, if someone comes to you and they've got Mercury, Rahu, and Saturn together in their ninth house, and they say, "When am I ever going to meet my spiritual teacher?" What would you say to that?
What sign is this taking place in?
This will take place in the sign of, let's see, Pisces.
Okay. I think that what one can be helpful here as an astrologer is to help the person see the lay of the land regarding what's happening with that Mercury-Saturn-Rahu combination. It's a little bit like being able to see the chess pieces on the board. One can objectify it a little bit and see the underlying structure, and that depersonalizes a little bit and maybe makes us have the objectivity to see, inverted commas, this weakness, perhaps, or this blind spot, to see the lay of the land and realize, okay, this is something that trips me up all the time. And then this might help in answering the question around when will I ever meet my guru?
Mm-hmm.
Although there's so much else that I would like to know before I can really give you a good answer about that. And as I know on YouTube, people want to throw these kind of questions to you. I know that you're also not going to answer these questions based on, even knowing
this is
the
just
sign.
hypothetical.
Yeah, even knowing the sign, the planets, it really is not necessarily enough, is it? Because there are so many other factors to take into account.
Right. Yeah.
But is there something that you would like to say to someone with Mercury and Saturn and Rahu in Pisces?
I think I was focusing more on just like the general idea of that Lajatati Avashta, that when you get like Mercury and Saturn together, that there's never really not enough information there, where a person might meet someone who's very knowledgeable.
Yeah.
But then well, there's got to be something they're not telling me. And so, like you were saying, you can see the pieces on the chessboard, and as the astrologer, you can explain, look, here's how this is set up. And so you can keep asking that question, but you're probably just going to keep asking that question if you just keep doing the same thing.
Yeah.
I put you on the spot with that one.
Yeah, but also why it's also good for us to not necessarily answer those questions is that often people, I'm going to say Westerners, turn to astrology at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, when they're having a really hard time in their life and they need an answer to something, and they hear a YouTube video that says, if you've got Mercury and Saturn with Rahu in Pisces, you're never going to find your guru or whatever. Right. And it can just be that one more nail in the coffin that, is too much. And that's what I would say to everybody is don't be afraid of what's in your chart. Don't let YouTube, one comment, give you a sense that there's no cure for this, or this is the worst mark on your chart that you could ever have, because the astrologer's job is to work with you to find creative solutions to that problem, which could be surrender and acceptance, or they could be like cognitive behavioral therapy, could be practices that you could do, or it could be a mantra, or it could be a gemstone, or it could be strengthening your Mercury, or it could be working on Rahu. Yeah. So whatever you hear at midnight on YouTube, make sure that you then reach out to a compassionate astrologer who can actually analyze your whole chart.
Yeah, very good. Very good. That's the best advice I've heard in a long time. And then when we think about astrology from the perspective of not necessarily personal matters, but how the study of astrology itself can lead to deeper philosophical understanding about life, how have you seen that play out, maybe for yourself or for others?
Yeah, I think this is more what I was interested in when I began to learn about astrology. Is one can learn about Ayurveda, maybe that's how people become interested in Vedic philosophy, or you get to hear some mythology and you see the Mahabharata or you read the Bhagavad Gita, and Vedic astrology kind of dangles in front of us. Okay, I'm gonna put every indicator of every karma that could ever happen. I'm going to put it on a piece of paper and I'm going to interpret it. So I was very interested in how one could explain everything. And that's what drew me to Vedic astrology. And that journey for me has, yeah, you find things that you didn't expect to find. So I thought it would bring me some peace knowing that there was a place where everything that could ever happen was written down.
Right.
But I think what it has done is vastly expanded my understanding and my horizons
Right.
of what is possible and how life is incarnating in so many different forms. So my worldview, my universe view is a lot bigger. I think that's one thing that people will find if they really get into Vedic astrology. My sense of time has really lengthened. So when I came into this as a Westerner, I just want to state that I think it was still at the end of the Obama period. I really felt like, oh, we're on the up and up, like we've solved this now. There's a black president, there's equal rights for everybody, like we've just about achieved this hippie dream. And now here comes utopia. And Vedic astrology has probably lengthened out my time span until utopia arrives. So I think that it gives one a sense of time and a sense of patience, a sense that we're all doing absolutely the best that we can, and that it takes time for all of us to resolve our karma. So just add a few more lifetimes into whatever it was that you thought was going to happen. But so those are kind of like the things I didn't expect to find. What it has given me that I do find very reassuring is the structure of the universe and the structure of karma. So the way, like the actual mechanics of how the gunas are incorporated into creating the karma you experience, how the elements are incorporated into the karma that you're experiencing, how the planets, how the houses, how the signs that's happening in, it gives one a sense of almost looking behind the scenes. You can almost see behind this great illusion that we're all playing in, you can almost see the components. So I would say that on that level, it hangs together really well. All of those layers upon layers of manifestation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And
I think it's
probably lots of other stuff. What did you get from
well,
learning Vedic astrology on that philosophical level? What did it give to you?
yeah, I think what I enjoyed about it was I came to the understanding that the planets were really just an expression of ourselves, or a state of consciousness of ourselves. We know that the planets rule over different signs, and we know that the signs are related to the chakras, within the human body. And so by looking at the chart and by looking at the states of the planets, what we can see is, what are those habits and patterns that are within us? And then when we look at the state of a planet, if a planet is functioning well, more than likely we can sort of see that the quality and the energy of us that is represented by that planet or that chakra is able to express more freely. And if a planet isn't in such a good situation, we know that the chakra and the energy of it needs some work. So rather than saying, my Mercury is in a difficult situation because of this, we can say, oh, well, yes, my Mercury is in a difficult situation because of this, but this is just now the state of it. And if I turn my attention to it and I start cultivating the more positive aspects of that Mercury, then it's as if I am cultivating or broadening my understanding of myself through that planet and through that chakra. So it was more of a sense of not seeing the planets as separate entities, but just as aspects of my own self, really.
Yeah, and that then marries beautifully with Kriya practice, right?
Yeah.
Basically what you're saying is that there's a way of understanding the chart in an embodied form. Like your one's physical manifestation is also your birth chart.
Absolutely. That's the birth chart is the snapshot of the momentum of karma and energy that we've been kind of sustaining. And so that's the neat thing about astrology, is if we can see that, then we can step back and say, all right, well, in the present moment, how can I shift the momentum a little bit such that those energies take on a different quality or a different layer, a different level of being. And as we go through our lives, I think this is important. We often think that the birth chart is static. It's static from the moment of birth, but from that point forward, we have options to work with it, to see where can we go from here. And I think a lot of people miss that sometimes.
Yeah, and this is for me why I don't really recommend gemstones or those kind of, because what I spoke to you about, I'm not really of that faith around Vedic. I'm not that believer type of Vedic astrologer, but what I do recommend is meditation, because it is what is going to allow you to have more awareness. And in Vedic astrology, we actually talk about planets being awake, being sleepy, or being asleep. And if one has a planet that is asleep and it has some karma to give, usually that karma will arrive before we've even realized, it will manifest itself. And that's when we'll realize this has happened. Whereas if one has a planet that is awake, one actually sees the coming together of the events, and that awareness, that awakeness allows one to step out of the way and just detach from that. And the karma will probably still play out, but with less impact and suffering. Right. So to me, when I was learning Vedic astrology, it seemed that very small fact about Vedic astrology, that planets can be awake, sleepy, or asleep, that is where in some ways we have the most power, is to the only thing we can do is increase our awareness, because we can do that with meditation. That is something that will happen. You will gain more awareness.
Yeah. And those, the practices of gemstones and mantras, I've always seen those to be like more focal points than cure-alls, in that, each gemstone has a representation to a planet. And I always looked at it like it was a fuel cell. And so if you are able to consciously kind of focus on positive change, or if you're able to consciously, as you mentioned, in an awake state, like see what's happening, then you can kind of use the yantra or the gemstone or the mantra as a way of bringing more awareness. That way, when a situation does come your way, you know that you have the energy, you have the more expansive consciousness to decide to respond rather than to react.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's how I would need to use those tools. But I do feel like if people really, really believe in something, there's also kind of magic there too. But it's not the kind of astrologer I am. But because I think there is there's when I'm working as an astrologer, there's a whole lot of data that I analyze, and that is. It is just a repeatable skill. I'm just analyzing data like any other research anywhere in the world. It's that kind of skill. And that's a huge amount of what I put my time and effort into. And then there's another part of just being an intelligent being, that one has intuition. So there's also a part of being astrologer that some small part gives you an insight. Oh, I should talk to them about this, or I think this is really what's going to help in this situation. And then there's this third thing, which is it's like the spontaneity of the moment, that has nothing to do with the research. It doesn't have to do with your intuition, but it's the color that the person was wearing, or it's the room that they show up in. And suddenly you realize as the astrologer, one needs to talk about this or that. And it didn't show up in the research, didn't come in the intuition. It comes from those omens that we see. And that's what I mean, that I think the gemstone can work in a data way. If you really apply your attention to it, it can work in an intuitive way, and it can just work in some belief, magic, faith way. Yeah. If that's where you come from, if that's the kind of faith that you have.
Well, that's the other part of being an astrologer is that you can look at a person's chart to determine, will that actually be effective for them?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I think
Yep.
a lot of
Yep.
more popular ways of looking at astrology, there's a sense of there are these things that just work all the time.
Yep.
When, again, the beauty of astrology is that you can look at a person's chart and say, well, is it really going to be beneficial for this person? You know,
Yep.
and that's another way that, you're not really overcoming fate. You're just participating with the
Yeah.
information that is there and using it, utilizing it, directing it.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, can I just give you, sorry, you asked me a big question about what I got from learning Vedic astrology. I got a couple of other answers for
Okay.
you
You
as
just,
well.
as we were talking, you were writing
Yes.
these down.
Yes, exactly. Which is that I think that becoming like this whole thing of becoming an astrologer and becoming aware of the Vedic knowledge incorporalized into people, it gives you a compassion for suffering that you wouldn't have if you didn't do this job, because it's easy to get caught up in your own world and think that what you've experienced is pretty tough and pretty yucky. And I'm sure it was.
Mhm.
And then you start reading charts and you realize many, many, many people are also experiencing a lot of, and it can blow your mind, the things that people survive and how they survive and how beautifully they thrive.
Mhm.
So I think Vedic astrology also opens your awareness to the compassion for others and the resilience that we all have,
Yeah.
which probably leads into another thing that I think Vedic astrology teaches you, which Ryan and I have discussed previously, which is how to really understand the role of Saturn.
Mhm.
That as Westerners, we often don't learn much about how to deal with those times that are unfair and hard, unexpected, deprive us of things, are very, very disciplined. There's no negotiating with them. They're just tough. They just come tough. And Vedic astrology helps you put that into a meaningful place in your celestial understanding. So
Yeah.
those were two things that were inspired from our answers.
Well, one other thing that just came up as you were talking about that was, seeing what other people go through is very important, and you can really expand your awareness. But I think the other side of that is it also depersonalizes things for you. And this is one of the things that came up for me with astrology. I started to recognize, not just with clients, but with people I was interacting with, I was just interacting with their chemical structure or their patterns or their conditioning. And so, whereas before, you can take things really personally. Oh, they do this because of that. They treat me this way because of that. Or I don't get along with them because of this. Or I absolutely love this person. I can look at people's charts, and I know you can too, and we can see, oh, we're looking at this kind of combination of traits. And so, for example, if I see someone with Jupiter and Moon on angles or on my ascendant, I know I'm just going to want to spend all the time in the world with them because it's such an uplifting feeling for me. Or I had one teacher, he was an Ayurvedic teacher. He had Mars and Saturn right on top of my 10th house. And I just thought he was a terrible person. He wasn't. But it was because of that combination of energies with my chart. And so I think one of the beautiful things is that it depersonalizes the experience. So you recognize that, as you mentioned, it's not all about you. Like everyone's walking around with different, again, chemical structures or patterns and how they come together. Well, that's just going to be like when two chemicals come together, what's going to happen there? And then you can respond more appropriately and without getting so caught up in the ego. So I think another beautiful part of astrology is it really shows you that the ego certainly exists, but it's really just a lens that you're looking through. And there's a lot of stuff filtering through that lens, which makes you experience the world in a certain way. So you learn how to kind of step back from it a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. There is so much to be gained from studying Vedic astrology. Whether you ever go on to become an astrologer or not, there's a lot to take just from the philosophy and the way it is incorporated into a body.
Yeah.
And that is a great invitation to invite people to come along to find out a little bit more about Vedic astrology on teachable.com.
Yes. Yes. So as you know, we have the Actual Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship Program, and Fiona is the curator of that now. So we have a code here, if I can find it. If you go to Vedic Vedic-astrology.teachable.com. And if you're interested in participating, you can use the code KRIYA, so Kriya essentially, and that'll give you 25% off of the course. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to Fiona was to let you know about that course, because a lot of people ask me where to study astrology, and also to introduce you to Fiona, because she is a wonderful astrologer. But the Astral Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship Program, it also helps to support the Kriya Yoga podcast and everything we do with Kriya Yoga Online. So I wanted to take some time to share that with you. Is there anything you'd like to say about the course, Fiona?
Obviously, I highly recommend the course. You already heard at the beginning of the podcast. It is extremely thorough and very authentic. Mm-hmm. It is from the bare bones. It will give you that architecture that you need to place in all of the components that make up Vedic astrology. So it's a solid foundation, a solid way of storing this dynamic field of Vedic astrology. And yeah, it's all self-paced now on teachable.com. So you can, access it at your own pace. And you can, if you would like to, participate in the certification pathway and work with me. And I will help you with all of the accessible components if that is something that you would like to do. And every time you hand in an assessment, we get together on Zoom and we talk through your written work and what you've processed and presented. But we also get to answer questions about Vedic astrology as they're coming up for you with the videos. So I really am here to accompany you on that journey if it's something that you would like to learn more about. I highly recommend the Astral Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship Program that's on Teachable.
And you also are the host of the Vedic Astrology podcast, right?
I am the host of the Vedic Astrology podcast. So if you would like to listen to information about Vedic astrology, please check us out. There are many different episodes. Some of them speak specifically about particular techniques in astrology, particular combinations and how they might show up in your chart. Sometimes we have astrologers on to talk about their path as an astrologer and what they're currently working on. Sometimes we analyze a particular current event, like a person, a famous celebrity or a famous event that's occurring. So there's a bit of something for everyone on the Vedic Astrology podcast. And love.
And that's been going since 2021, I think, right?
We are about to get to 3 years. I think that will be in June, July. I think we launched it on the 4th of July, actually.
That's right.
So it's about to get to 3 years. It has all of those kind of milestones. I think we just got to 50,000 downloads or something the other day. So yes, it is ever growing. And it's obviously it's a baby that I love to see grow stronger and stronger. So yeah, we'd love to have you along.
Yeah. All right. So everyone knows, first of all, they can find you, Fiona, at www.fionamarks.com, correct?
Correct. And you can follow me on Patreon at Fiona Marks, all together one word. And if you join me on Patreon, we have meditation a couple of times a week. Once a month, we research a chart together. We currently have a Greatness of Saturn book club that we're working our way through that epic myth. So there's lots of different things that you can interact with me on Patreon, and you can book a reading with me at the website that you mentioned, fionamarks.com.
And then the astrology.
Marques, because it's Fiona Marks, but it's Portuguese Marks, not Western Marks. So Fiona Marques.
Excellent. And the podcast is it just the Astral Vedic Astrology? No, the Vedic Astrology Podcast.com.
Yeah, all together, all one word, the Vedic Astrology Podcast.com.
Excellent. And if you want to learn more from my videos teaching astrology with the guidance of Fiona, it's Vedic-astrology.teachable.com. And if you use that coupon Kriya, Kriya, it'll give you 25% off of the tuition for it. But anyway, I want to thank you so much for being here with us today, Fiona. It was wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you for having me, Ryan. I learned a lot talking over all of this stuff, and I love talking about astrology. So if, as you're listening to this, that's the other thing that happens if you study Vedic astrology, you're going to want to talk about it all the time. So feel free to reach out. I would love to continue the conversation. But thanks, everybody, and thanks a lot, Ryan.
And take care.
Bye.